So I've been giving some thought to the 𝗂𝗲 situation, realizing something really doesn't sit well with me about the way that people even describe 𝗂𝗲. And I've been thinking about, I personally have a conception, or, I've conceptualized that it is Marduk who is being worshipped rather than Yahweh, or this quote unquote Yahweh that they're worshiping is Marduk and not 𝗪𝗲. And I also think it's worth noting that 𝗪𝗲, 𝗪̇tože, and 𝗪𝗲 were sent by Anu, or he brought them and then he brought them in charge. But what I think is that he sent them and then 𝗪𝗲 was in charge, even though he was supposed to rule with his siblings. He was left in charge, and he left, and or I guess you could even say abdicated his role or ceded his role. But why this is interesting and of note for me is because it's Yahweh supposed to be associated with Jupiter. The way that the entities that are aligned with Yahweh are, they're not Jupiterian at all. None of them seem to have anything to do with higher education or wisdom or any kind of Sagittarian traits. And, they're supposed to be jovial and joyous and fun and funny. I personally have never ever noticed that about any description of the entities that are associated with him. I've only ever seen characteristics of Marduk. So to me, it makes perfect sense that Marduk is the son of Jupiter, or 𝗪𝗲, who is using his name to, using his name, his position, to grant him authority, in part because he was not actually supposed to be the king. And I feel that Thoth, as the son of 𝗪𝗲, was the one who was supposed to be king, and Marduk usurped his throne by unaliving Tiamat. That's what I think happened, and I think that so Saturn and they also had already unalived 𝗪𝗄. So this is all about further and further making the collective fall, because each time they are unaliving a primordial. And in terms of Tiamat, I don't believe that they unlived her. I believe that he stunned her and used her, dismembered her. We also hear, or we see this story in Egyptian mythology when Set dismembers Osiris. We see this dismemberment happen again. So, and we know that when that happened, Isis collected all of the pieces of Osiris and reformed them. And I believe that after that happened, Osiris's son was supposed to be the pharaoh. And that's why Set did what he did, because Set wanted to be the pharaoh. But it wasn't his right to be. Is this much? I don't know too much about Isis. She's not a deity that I've been particularly drawn to engaging. But what I do know is that she is seen as the high priestess, right? But I also think about like this idea of her being the high priestess. The volume's going to be messed up because I had my headphones turned on and I didn't realize. This idea of Isis being the high priestess is interesting to me, because I do think that the corruption of Isis would be the Jezebel. And we know that Jezebel came from that Mesopotamian area. So perfect timing. And we also know that Queen of the Damned, Akasha, was in Egypt. And she was doing dark magics and was possessed by a beastly spirit that overtook her and made her into the first vampire, the Queen of the Damned. Because somebody was talking about how they think that the God that people think that they're praying to is not that God, and that entity is just collecting energy so that they can manifest in the physical in the present. And I think that that sounds about right, because when you attach such a fallen entity to yourself as they have, it'll make you a vampire for sure. It'll make you a vampire. And that's why, that person, they got bitten, or they are the first vampire, and they spread their disease in a different way. It looks different when it's spread, and it has to do with this consumption of fluids. That's something that people really pointed out. Somebody pointed it out, that spitting, the swapping of spit was the ritual that between the woman who turned the twin who got turned by the quadroon woman in Sinners, that was the ritual, the swapping of spit. It's not. I don't know why they thought that, but I do think that it's worth noting, because this is something that spreads through the fluids. And I even would say that blood, okay, but it's really, there are levels to this. It's not only blood. It's anything that carries the plasma. They want the plasma because they need it. They need lifeblood. They need the plasma. The plasma comes from, it carries life in it. Like the sun has plasma. We have all these little suns inside of us. I think that, in fact, the blood is the living waters, and the cells are all little suns. And that's why they try to consume it, but that's like in such a literal sense, and they have to do this stuff in a literal sense because they can't do it spiritually. They cannot do it spiritually. And the reason they can't do it spiritually is because they don't have access. They're not ever going to be there anyway. They're not in this lifetime high vibrational enough to have
access to the living waters, that would require them getting to 4D. I think these motherfuckers are in like 1D even. You know what I mean? Like some people, you know, they don't ever engage with like the 1D, the lower, the netherworld. I mean, maybe the netherworld is -1 and we're all always drawn to 0, but we don't want to go to the netherworld. We don't want to go to the negative world. So that's why we have to strive for higher dimensions. I don't know though. I mean, that makes sense actually, because like if we're thinking about, you know, waves and the material realm, when we look at it, the visible light spectrum is a fraction. It's a fraction of a tiny, tiny fraction of what we can access. It's worth noting. And yeah, I think that's pretty much that. But what I'm saying is like, if you think of it, I don't even think that Yahweh is Jupiter. And it could be Jupiter, but I would say Jupiter's divine counterpart is Saturn. If you know anything about astrology, you know that. I define Saturn as a divine feminine. So if anything, Jupiter is actually 𝗪𝗄. And he was the one who was tired of the children, the first wave of gods making noise, and wanted Tiamat to kill them, and she didn't want to. And so anyway, he eventually ended up being killed. Maybe by the second wave of gods, I don't remember. But yeah, he eventually ended up getting killed, and then she was attacked. She's not dead though. So if anything, what I want to impart is it just simply wouldn't, like, it actually would make more sense that 𝗪𝗀𝗃 would be Jupiter, because 𝗪𝗃 is actually associated with Jupiterian traits. And Marduk being Mars, son of, and then think about it, like, Mars was fucked up and used to be living and now is dead. And they came here to Earth to colonize the Earth and are on this war path trying to bring that same BS to Earth. Right? And I think it's only because, I don't even think that it's because they were like, oh, I better go do this to Earth because of Earth. I think honestly, it's just like they were like desperate to do it. And they knew that Earth was taking on beings who had lost their planets, like in Marduk. And so I think that they just saw an opportunity and took it. And you have to think about what happens when a planet is destroyed. It's still that consciousness, you know, and as long as the beings of that planet survive, there is an opportunity for those seeds to be sown and for that consciousness to ascend again to the level that it was at. And I'm thinking that that's what happened with Lyra or Lyra. But yeah, I think that I think that the god that they're worshiping is Marduk. I think that Melkor is involved in it. But definitely Marduk, number one, as Yahweh. And I don't think that that has anything to do with Jupiter, actually. Yeah, I don't think that has anything to do with Jupiter. So the one that they're calling Yahweh, it's just like this Yahweh being, I think, is just like not, it doesn't, I don't know why they want to use this name. Like maybe it's like a sacred vibration or something that they're like really trying to like co-opt for whatever reason. But I can tell you this much. I do not believe that Yahweh is Jupiter. That doesn't make any sense to me. The colors that are associated with it are they don't have anything to do with Jupiter. And then the counterpart, think of it like this. Chang'o is associated with this, but that's Martian energy and is associated with Oya as the counterpart. Oya is not Hera, Queen of Heaven, wife. It's just like, this is not true. This is not true. This doesn't make any sense. So that's what I'm downloading, and I'm going to go back to watching my movie, and I hope that, this was helpful at all for anybody, because it's certainly helpful for me. But I guess what I'm going to just wrap up with saying is that I think that the corruption of Isis, maybe that happened with the attack on Tiamat, the high priestess archetype. And there was this inverted version that is the Jezebel. That is what I think. Because the priestess is not the incarnation necessarily. The incarnation is Sekhmet. The priestess seems to be Isis. And what I also think is that Marduk is pretending to be Yahweh, because Mars, those Martian ideals are not even associated with Jupiter. They're not. Jupiter is not a warring god. Like, he will be if he has to be, but yeah, it's like Shiva. You know what I mean? Like, he will be if he has to be, but that's not what he's about. He's about, like, sacred divine wisdom. Who is the warring one is more so Saturn, 𝗂𝗫, the counterpart. And they balance one another out. It just is crazy to me how people are associating, like, if you think about the astrology and the description of Jupiter, it's not at all what people describe about Yahweh, like Yeve, Chang'o, like none of that. That is all Martian energy. So to me, it's like, I really do think that he is the grandson. Because also it's like, if you think about Anu, do they talk about who the wife of Anu is? I've never heard anyone talk about the wife of Anu. So I think that, like, but then it's also, yeah, it's talking about Tiamat and the queen of the heavens, of the celestial realm here. And yeah, if she's related to Saturn and the rings of Saturn are that prison, then it's Jupiter and Saturn balancing one another. But they killed 𝗪𝗪. And they then later said that they killed Tiamat. But Enlil is the son of Enlil, Enki, 𝗏𝗏𝗏, are they not the sons and daughter of Apsu and Tiamat? I'm going to look at my chart. Just give me one blessed moment so I can be sure of what I'm saying. Yep. Okay. Tiamat had Antu and 𝗂𝗍. 𝗂𝗍, Antu's the sky mother, 𝗂𝗍 is the earth mother, and I guess they were with Anu. And Antu, the sky mother, was the mother of Enki, and 𝗂𝗍, the earth mother, was the mother of 𝗏𝗏𝗏 and Enlil. Enlil, lord of the sky, lady of life, 𝗏𝗏𝗏. And Enlil was the father of Nergal and Ereshkigal. The original Lilith was their daughter. Let's look at this again. Apsu and Tiamat, Namu, which makes me think about the Namu. They had Anshar and Kishar, earth and heaven. From that, they had Anu, sky god, and 𝗂𝗍, sky goddess, Antu. And then, so Enlil, Enki, Lugalbanda, and Shulpe had that's their parents, they're the great grandchildren. So 30 generations later. And then apparently Marduk is the son of Enki. That's not how I remember it. I remember Marduk being the son of Enlil. But it's repeated multiple times. Which actually makes sense. If I said I think that Enki was supposed to be the king, could that Enki and Enlil story be like Set and Osiris? If 𝗏𝗏𝗏 is Isis, could that be the case? Namu, mother goddess, partner of Anu. Namu birthed Tiamat, Kingu, and Apsu. Tiamat did end up killing Kingu when they were married after Apsu's death because he wanted to get her to attack the lower gods. It's difficult because a lot of them have the same names, I guess. And they had a lot of intermarrying going on. Yeah, Enki and Damkina are the parents of... Yeah. And then there's also supposed to be Thoth is also the child of Enki, apparently. Marduk was the patron god of Babylon, so it makes sense that they would try to say that he is the king if they're trying to take over the world, but I don't believe he is. So I got to think on this because his mother is 𝗵𝗫 and his father is 𝗵𝗁𝗁. I have to think about this. But Marduk, apparently his Hebrew name was Nimrod. This is really piecing a lot together for me. I'll be back, guys. Thanks for tuning in.